A1, check. A2, check. Oh, hey there. As promised, we did our homework. Part 2 of production roles, crew positions, starts now. This is Tim and Tim Talk. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Part 1 was awesome. We had so many great positions and roles to talk about. Tim Kerbavaz, please come on back because did you do your homework, first of all?
I did. I got my homework right here.
Fantastic. We were not lying and joking around when we said there are a lot of positions.
There are, and it just was too much to cover in one episode, but we're back with some more, and let's get right into it.
Coming up next, all right, playbacks, records, and we also paired in replay operators because it's not as common of a position. I really only had replay in the sports world. E-gaming conferences is a big replay position here. And in this one right here, by the way, may I call out, what are you seeing over here? The upside down peat cups. That's my impromptu lamp that we built. We were given a light that was too bright, and so we basically created a little lantern. You just cut a little hole in the cup, put it upside down, and now you have a nice, smooth, dispersed lighting. It's a little backstage hack there. That's everyone else. Please have it. It's yours.
I know. One of the things that you can never say about production is that we're not scrappy. I mean, we definitely find solutions. A lot of things get constructed out of gaff tape and zip ties, things that I can say I'm not proud to have done out of gaff tape and zip ties. But, our goal is to make things happen. Obviously, if things can't be done safely, we don't do them at all. But when it's things like this that are not going to impact anyone's health and safety, but just improve the production, as simple as just being able to see backstage, that's a great hack. And as you mentioned, playback and records, we alluded to that in graphics, but one of the things we like to do is take the videos out of somebody's slide deck. We don't necessarily want to have an embedded video in the slide deck because, as we've all seen, sometimes videos in slide decks don't work very well, and they hang up, they don't play well, the audio's off. So one of the things we often like to do is separate the playback of videos into a separate both computer with a dedicated playback software and a separate position to someone whose job is just making sure those videos play on time. And
now, can it be all in one? Absolutely. That is becoming more and more common. It used to not be, 10 years ago that it was impossible to be able to do it. It is becoming more and more common now, but still only on the small, rarely on the medium-sized shows do we see it, and never on the large shows.
But to that point, Tim, I think PowerPoint and Keynote have gotten much better about video playback.
Much better.
And so the reality is, those videos are going to play much more reliably on a contemporary computer with contemporary presentation software. But even 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I just wouldn't have trusted playback in a PowerPoint deck.
No one did. We're in a different time, so it is becoming a little bit more of a hybrid. Also, records, again, right, sometimes this is part of the playback position. Very critical, right? There is nothing more important than your records after the show. It becomes records are the least important position before the show and the most important position after the show. Right. So having it broken out and then having somebody be able to monitor the levels, the feeds, absolutely critical. At the end of the day, your whole show comes down to one drive. You want to make sure it looks and sounds good.
Exactly. And so this person is managing those roles. So looking next, audio. Tim, what do we know about audio?
Tim, you're the audio guy in this one. I think I see some mixers. I always think audio looks the coolest. I always love audio pictures. What are we looking at in this position?
Yeah, I mean, obviously lots of knobs and buttons and faders and things to do and control there. Our audio engineers, both our A1 and our A2 position, are controlling what people hear in the room and what people hear on our broadcast. And so we break this down into kind of A1, your front of house audio engineer, the person who's controlling the mix for the audience, and the A2, the audio assist, who's really handling the stage experience for audio. And so that A2's role encompass things like, managing wireless mics, managing getting
That's
folks mic'd
role.
up and ready to go, often managing audio network issues, intercom is often an A2 role. The kind of stuff that happens on stage is often the A2's role because they're sitting on stage. They're usually just right off the side of the stage. The A1 is out in the audience listening to what the audience hears and running that audio mix for the show.
I will say nobody knows who the A1 is until there is a slight bit of feedback in the room, and then all of a sudden,
Everyone looks over their
1,000
shoulder.
people, 1,000 people in the room all know exactly where that A1 position is and looking like, what's going on? How quickly they become the most well-known position. It is a tough position.
Well,
A1s are absolutely key.
And that
Make or
reminder
break.
that they're out in the audience. And so, they are listening to what the audience sees.
One
But
of
they
the
are, of
few.
course, out in the audience and visible to everyone. So many of our positions are hidden backstage, and the audio positions are
So why is
visible.
the audio position in the front of house position?
Right.
Which front of house refers to being in the audience?
Yeah, and we put the audio engineer at front of house in the audience because we want them to be mixing based on what the audience is hearing. We want them to mix to the audience's experience, not just in a pair of headphones. Obviously, if you're mixing for broadcast, you're often going to be backstage or in a truck outside. But your audio engineer who's mixing for the room needs to be in the room they're mixing for, because they're listening with their ears and measuring instruments to what the actual room sounds like, and not just hypothetically what it sounds like.
So speaking of mixing and having everybody hear your presentation, not everybody can hear. So thankfully, with technology, we have this amazing new position here that is becoming more and more popular, the Captioner, and also the captioning engineer position that you are very passionate about. So Tim, on this position, this is a great sort of hybrid position for the folks that are we've done it in the space where we put up just caption monitors for people, but also online as you can turn on and off. What does that refer to, Tim, when you can turn on and off the captions?
So when we talk about captions, we talk about a couple different things. We talk about closed captions, which is a word that lots of people know, which is a caption metadata that the viewer can turn on and off with a button. Then we talk about things like CART, which is CART is an acronym, which is screens in the room with the caption data, the text on the screen. So maybe we put those up in the front. If you're sitting in the first 5 rows, you can see that easily. And then when we talk about something called open captions, that's on the broadcast, burned into the video. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see those captions that are just part of the video. You can't turn them on and off. And so maybe, you have a stream that has burned-in captions when you have a platform that doesn't support the closed caption functionality. But maybe if you have a platform that supports that, you have a button where the viewer can turn it off if they don't want to see it.
And I don't know how they do it. This is a picture of Norma with a shout out to White Coat Caption. She is, absolutely a legend in her field. If the audience, if you guys ever have a chance to go see a captioner work in person, it is pure magic mysticism. I have no idea how they keep up, and they do their success rate with the words are unbelievable. And we're talking like a conference that can go 8 hours. This position is absolutely tough. But this position alone requires the next position to be able to get it out to the audience. Who and what are these? Look at these cool positions here. So this is a fun one here and a show that we did together as well.
Yeah.
The streaming engineer, Tim. Let's talk about them.
This is a position that I filled on some of our shows. This is the person who manages all the streams that are leaving the building, that are going out to your live stream platform. So this is the person who's taking, your broadcast cut show from your video director and basically, squeezing it into the internet to get it out to all of your various platforms. And so, this might be a remote link to another studio. It might be a link to YouTube or any of the number of virtual event platforms we've talked about in other episodes. But it's the person who's managing those streams that are going out to the world and making sure that they're, high quality, that they're, meeting the internet requirements, matching the settings for the platform. And, one of the things that we do here is, this picture with all the boxes in the blue light. This was an event where we had a bunch of simultaneous streams going out because we had primary and backup streams going to multiple platforms. We had streams going out to other countries. And so, we had all these various streams. And so on this show, this is a picture that I took actually of a show that I was working. And, kind of just managing all those boxes, getting the video out to all the right places with the right caption data, the right video going out all to the correct destination. That is,
I think you got it there. That's exactly what the streaming does. It's just not to YouTube or Twitch or Zoom even now. It's to potentially to the other room, to the other space. Very critical position, and it is the bridge to the outside world. but they need to be able to see what's taking place. And our next position, the most well-known, I would say, of all positions here. I mean, who hasn't gotten into this field and wanted to be a camera operator? Probably what draws the most amount of people to our world here. The camera operator.
And as we said earlier, the camera is the eyes of your audience for your event. And so the camera operator is the person who's making sure that camera gets the best view of whatever, needs to be on stage, on screen. And, that camera director is giving direction to the camera operator, but the camera operator also has to make last minute decisions like what are the important things to show here? Am I in focus? Those kinds of questions that are the camera operator's job.
And what I love about some of these pictures here, on the picture on the left here, is not every position is the ideal position, right? We have to go into the world. We have to work within the boundaries that we are given. We just can't create more space or tell the audience not to go one way or the other. So as you see on the ground, we literally had to put tape on the ground. Like, please don't stand there. We were filming in a small room. And unfortunately, people's heads were there. With a low ceiling, it prevented us from unfortunately going higher. So as we said earlier, gaff tape is our friend. I think one of the 101 ways or 100,000 ways we have used gaff tape. Here's yet another example. And surprisingly, it worked.
And we talked about we talked about the audio engineer being in the room. The camera operator is one of the other people who's going to be in amongst the audience, and so is visible to the audience.
Absolutely. And what's amazing about this position for the past year, it's been all web cameras. I mean, that's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and so we're looking forward to going back to some really nice cameras back to our in-person events. And so these cameras, how do we make sure they're dialed in right? That the view they're getting, their image quality, and their signal flow is accurate.
So this is probably what a lot of people have realized over the past years. Like, why do all the cameras look so different? Why does one shot like yellow and orange and white or blue? In the professional world, we have these problems as well, but we also have a professional solution. And this is the broadcast engineer / EIC. And as you can see on the right, this is probably just the start of the patch bay of all the cables coming in. And then it goes to the position on the left, which has what we have a CCU, camera control unit, which has control over all of the aspects of the camera. And I don't know if you can, Tim, I don't know if you can see this. I put a little Easter egg on the camera, on the monitor there. That may or may not be Neil Armstrong, who may or may not have been one of the first men to the moon. So pretty fascinating. That was a big deal, right? So you want to be able to make sure that your iris looks good and that your composition overall looks good. More seen in higher productions because this is an expensive piece to have of your production, but this technology is getting cheaper, and we have now been able to put this on some of our shows with tighter budgets because technology has gotten cheaper.
And certainly we're talking about, big in-person events with expensive equipment, but there are some ways to do some of these same kinds of tweaks with some of the virtual production setups that we use. So, you can kind of dial in, even if we're using a webcam, we can adjust a little bit what those images look like. And speaking of adjusting images, we're talking about adjusting cameras, but what about adjusting the images that the audience is seeing in the room?
Should we remind the audience what a projector is, because it's probably been a year since at least anyone has seen or heard the need for a projector or a screen. We kid. So yeah, this is a projectionist right here, as you see, in charge of configuring the projector and screen. This is probably one of the easier ones of a projector. This is it's what we call on the ground. It's only connected we just put on top of a road case, put duvetine, and of course gaff tape to hold it all together at the end of the day. But so this is a very easy setup. Where it becomes more challenging is the projectors are one on top of each other, and what is called converging, where two projectors shoot the same image and look perfectly to each other. That is not an easy skill set to have. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of time to be able to do that. And on top of that, I forgot what I was going to say, but converging is...
convergence. And then the other thing projections will often do is blending. And so, when we have images that are wider than a single projector can fill, we'll often both converge and blend, it's called, when you have projectors overlapping to film, to fill a larger, wider screen. And so when you might have, 4, 6, 8 projectors stacked and converged and blended to make an ultra-wide image, One of the other ways that we make ultra-wide images is with LED screens. And
This is the newest and latest and greatest. Is it still the latest and greatest? I mean, it's been around for now.
it's been around a
Couple
while.
years.
Yeah, I feel like most folks have at least heard of LEDs, even if they aren't using them on smaller events. But LED walls or LED displays, are these tiles that get sort of stacked together to make a bigger image. That's then seamless, and you can kind of just keep adding panels, until you reach kind of the limits of the video signal. And so with these, go ahead.
Yeah,
Tim.
go ahead. So I was going to say LED walls, so on the image on the left where the color bar chart is, which is important, right? That calibrates your image. Also on the image to the right, you can see a pretty cool shot here is pixels go out on LED walls. So the new and the more modern LED walls, you can just pop those out and replace just a little segment of the wall. So that's how they fix dead pixels, because on massive walls that are going to run 20 feet long, 30 feet long, you will have dead pixels. But also what's really cool where you're seeing LED walls is in Hollywood and in cinema. This is a position that is going to be transitioning over to cinematic arts as well. So a lot of Star Wars, actually, I believe the Mandalorian was filmed on LED walls. They no longer use green screen. So super cool what you can do with these with this technology.
And Mandalorian actually started with ultra-wide projection with the projector blend. They had projections earlier, and they transitioned to ultra-fine pixel pitch LEDs. And that technology, the volumetric stage is what they call that, where you're essentially using LED or projection backdrop on camera. And actually rendering that backdrop live as the camera moves, and doing XR is the kind of buzzword for that. Uses
it
LED
is a big
wall.
buzzword.
It's a big
lately.
buzzword, and that's big in virtual production to give kind of infinitely large sets, right, with a relatively small physical space.
It's called green screen 2.0, which it's really not in any ways, but it is sort of the newer and better technology in that. So like I was saying earlier, it was smaller, the projection screen, but when they get larger, or when LEDs get large, as we're seeing now, they require a special position to make sure that it is safe. This is a very important position, because this is the one position, if this person doesn't do their job right, people can get seriously injured.
Yeah, this is a really critical position, and one really to not take lightly. And so, I don't want to make any jokes about the seriousness of this position and the criticalness of riggers being trained and certified. And what the riggers are responsible for is hanging things, rigging things from the ceiling, from fly bars in a theater to, building truss structures or rigging motors off of superstructures in the building. And so this person is working with engineers who've designed a production and made sure that we're working within the working limits of a building or structure, and then actually executing that build out of the physical structure of an event, things that are physically built up or flown from the ceiling. And so, as Tim mentioned, super critical for safety, and rigging improperly is really dangerous. And so, really making sure that when you're working with anything that's rigged, that you're really paying attention to things like load limits and manufacturer specifications for how things are being flown. And that's not just like the actual LED wall or the speakers and those recommendations, but even the hardware that we're using is rated and certified for that purpose.
And the nice thing is I've pretty much only seen riggers that care so much about keeping everybody safe. There's sometimes the more intense position, because I think they carry the weight of their position, may I say, when they're hanging a projector literally thousands and thousands of pounds above the audience. I mean, it is a high stress position. So a shout out to all the riggers there. You guys do fantastic work, and it's amazing every time what you guys accomplish.
And so, related to the rigger, and often what the riggers are rigging, is our lighting equipment. And so
that is true.
Our lighting department works really closely with the rigging department to get things up in the air. And of those lights, we have typically a lighting designer who is the person who designs what the lights look like, chooses kind of what looks and colors and fixtures get used. Electricians who really
the artist of the show. They paint the show with colors, and not only that, like the color, but the movement. Like, how do you want the gobos to move, or how do you want the different lighting equipment and fixtures to move? So not only is it choosing the palette, but where do you emphasize, at what temperature? These folks are artist. It's a fun position.
And speaking of color and temperature, our video departments work really closely with our lighting department because the light affects what the camera sees. And so, we're in this interplay of lighting for the in-person audience, but also lighting for the cameras. And cameras
How
and
diplomatically you said that, because oftentimes...
Yeah, exactly. And there is sometimes some tension there because cameras see the world differently than the human eye does. And so, we're really relying in the video world on our lighting designers to really work with us to make sure that, we're striking that balance between what the camera sees and what the in-person audience sees, and making sure that it's really gorgeous for both. And all those lights, and in fact, all of our video equipment and all of our audio equipment require a tremendous amount of electricity. And so in the lighting department, the show electrician is responsible for, getting electricity from, these big industrial connectors off the wall or from generators outside to all of our equipment that has really broad power needs. Some things use a tremendous amount of electricity, and some things are like a wall wart, right? And so we're kind of this broad range, and so just making sure that we all, in all of our departments, have the right kind of power in the right places, and that we're doing that safely, that things are grounded. And then our technicians and grips are responsible for getting all of that equipment set up in place, focused correctly, that the lights look and are positioned well, and making sure that everyone has gotten the right equipment in the right place.
All right. Well said, Tim. Well said. The next one here, the network engineer and the IT technicians. These folks here are the ones that are responsible. This is a very important, let's say they're all so important here. But sometimes if network and IT goes, everybody outside of the venue, also those inside of the venue, will lose signal, will lose the show. So network engineering is extremely important to load balance and to be able to have the correct bandwidth to go to our encoders, which goes to the viewing audience, which also may go to a breakout room, which may be in another part of the building. How do you get it there?
Exactly.
We're seeing a picture here that when we were in New York, when we walked past, what was this, Times Square?
This is network cabling set up for the Times Square New Year's Eve in 2019. So this is, cables that are the whole world watched the New Year's Eve celebration down those fiber cables. And as we talked about, the network position is critical to everywhere else in the show because so much of every other department runs on the network. Lighting and sound and video are all now network connected. And everything from, ArtNet in the lighting world and Dante in the audio world to our streams and NDI connections where we're sending video from cameras and switchers and around the room and between buildings via the network. We're relying on these transport technologies that are all network based, and so having network engineers who really understand the production needs and working with production specific network vendors or network vendors that are open to the very sort of weird complex needs that we have in the production world. And maybe weird. I think a lot of office network engineers are used to a printer, and we're doing a lot of weird things that I think often are kind of uncomfortable for sort of more traditional IT firms. And so what I've loved working on productions when we had network teams that really focused on event networking and, making sure that, everyone in the event has the right network needs.
Tim, all of this isn't possible, of course, without the venue. This is a shout out to the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco. If I think one of the most beautiful venues in one of the most beautiful locales possible, and as a rarity, it even has parking, which is like gold in San Francisco.
That's amazing.
So Tim, front of house, back of house, who are these people?
So we talked about our front of house audio technician. We talked about, that kind of role and position. The front of house is, the audience side of the theater, where the audience exists from the lobby into the house of the theater. Back of house is on the other side of the curtain, and the technician and actor and talent
basically
side.
all the people that we saw,
exactly.
right? Like all the positions.
Back of house.
We're considered back of house.
Exactly. And so when we talk about venue staff, we're talking about front of house staff are the box office, the ushers, and the house manager who are managing the audience experience, and back of house staff are all of us behind the scenes and the ancillary theater staffers that work back there.
So Tim, is the A1 and camera? Are they technically back of house in the front of house, or are they front of house? How do we...
I think as technical positions, we'll call it a wash there.
Yeah, agreed.
We talked about our theater staff, our front of house, back of house staff. Let's think about some other positions here. One that
Yes.
I think is increasingly relevant in world where everyone's on camera, hair and makeup, making sure folks, look good on camera. And, it's not necessarily, doing everyone's, sort of theatrical makeup like you're an actor, but, making sure there's a little less shine on your forehead, getting that part in your hair, that cowlick done, just making sure everyone is looking good on camera. And then
it's just a little bit of courtesy maintenance, I would say. It's oftentimes, typically what we see is men are in the chair faster than women, but still, no one's really in the chair longer than 5 minutes.
It's really
if
just
that. It is
getting you camera
a light
ready.
touch.
And then my favorite position in all of our positions.
Tim, how could it be your favorite position? This is one of my favorite positions, although it is missing the coffee.
Craft services and catering. So
where's the coffee? How do you call this a craft service position, Tim, if there's no coffee?
I know, I
on
really
the
screwed
table?
up with this picture. I just love the fresh fruit. So often we don't have
fresh
fruit.
What is
I know, but coffee is life, and craft services provides the coffee for all of your crew. So catering is the food your audience eats. Craft services is for all of us who are in the craft of production and feeding us.
By the way, like a good technician, I did what everyone does when they are given free food, is find a way instantly to complain about it. So that is just pretty much what every technician does. But we are really grateful and always thankful, and so kind and considerate whenever clients take care of the crew. It definitely means a lot.
Definitely, and it helps us do our work better. Well, Tim, I think that was a pretty long list of production positions.
That was a long list, and apologies if we did not get to your position, because we actually, it may not seem like, we actually edited out a fair amount of positions because there's just too much. We tried to just speak to the ones that were all, we tried to cover the whole spectrum here, but not go into details with each one. Each position has so many sub-positions. I mean, Tim, as you can see on this list, on this index, we tried to cover a lot.
We covered a lot. We have a lot of positions that we talked about, a lot of various different roles that cover the breadth of production. But as you mentioned, we've definitely missed some of the roles on the production. And, obviously we apologize to the folks who don't see their names on this list, but, for our audience, gives you a taste of kind of what all those people that are running around backstage are doing on your show.
And if you're not sure, hit us up in the comments. The audience, will be helping to answer. And, you and I, we're going to be also answering questions too. So just let us know. If we didn't cover something, feel free to let us know. And also, this is a good time to say that if you found this helpful, or if you think one of your colleagues will find this helpful, we are shareable. So definitely get us out there to somebody that can benefit from this.
And make sure to follow us on all of our socials. We'll put those down here. And with that, I'm Tim.
And I'm Tim.
And we talked. Thanks so much.